Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Old School Gym Radio Podcast. I'm back. It's Coach Myers. I got my co-host here, Netty G, the business boss that keeps all the gym bros in check. What's up, Netty G?
What's going on, D?
And that's classic, right?
Love it.
And we got my man Cory G with us today. Cory G, what up?
What up? What up? Glad to be here. Excited. I've been doing podcasts for a long time, but I've never done it with y'all two before, so it's exciting.
Well, I think any time too you get me and G in the same room, I mean, there's no telling where the stories can go or what we're going to talk about. What do you want us to talk about today, Netty?
Well, I'm super excited for this one. You guys have been my business partners for like 2.5 years. Every time I'm around you, I hear a new story about OSG and you guys being partners. And I just want to bring it to everybody else because I know I enjoy them. And I'm sure that everybody else out there that's a part of the OSG family is just going to love what you guys are going to bring today. We're going to take it way back. We're going to start the early years before Dustin and Cory even knew each other or knew of each other. So if you guys independently, I kind of want you to tell our listeners how you initially came into weightlifting, through your family.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that's one of the themes that I want to keep coming back to on this podcast. Anytime we have guests on here, I want to kind of get to the root of where did the love for training, where did the love for weightlifting come from? And I think that's something that's very important to OSG because that's, with me and Cory, both of us, I think it started really early. So I'll kind of start with mine, then G, you can kind of go to your.
Good, man.
This is our origin stories, right?
Absolutely.
So I've told bits and pieces of it before, as a lot of people know. I grew up, watching my dad weightlift out in the garage. We had this old, detached garage at the house I grew up in, and he had weights out there, and a lot of the weights were homemade. His squat rack was homemade, his lat pull down, all that stuff was homemade. So a guy welded it for him in the mill. And he would, come home from work from the steel mill, and whether it was, summertime and 90 degrees or wintertime and 0, he was out there and he would lift weights every day. He had one of those old, torpedo heaters he'd put in the garage. And in the summertime, he was still coaching football for Stanton. It wasn't even Edison North yet, Stanton High School. And, I don't even know if they had a weight room. I know they didn't have a strength coach because that just didn't exist back then. But a lot of the athletes would come, lift weights with them. Their dads would drop them off or whatever. And so it was almost like he was their unofficial personal trainer or strength coach.
He's their strength coach.
Yeah, no one really looked at it like that back then. But so that's really some of my earliest memories is, watching those guys out there. And I thought it was so cool. I'm 5 and 6 years old, and there's high school kids lifting weights in my garage. J.M. Paludi, I remember, was out there. And, man, I wish I could remember the other guys' names. They were, so much older than me. It was hard for me to even remember. But so I would watch the way they would interact. My dad would shoot hoops with them and stuff, and he would kind of teach them their workout, and they would all just kind of lift weights together. And I remember just always knowing it was something that I would be a part of eventually. I was never in a rush or anything like that. Sure. I think I should also state too, around the same time, my mom had a big influence on me. She was always hiking and doing yoga and doing active stuff. So I think that might be part of why, as I've, weightlifting is always the base, but I've always been kind of well-rounded. I think I like to do other things besides, just weightlifting. But, I think it was just kind of inevitable. I thought, okay, once you get to a certain age, you start lifting weights. That's just what you do. He never kind of pushed it on me or anything like that. I would never played any sports. So the whole time in grade school, never played football, never played Little League. I had zero interest in it because I didn't grow up around it and didn't, I was really into art and drawing and stuff. But I can remember always wanting to lift weights. And, my dad would say, well, when you're 12, you can start lifting weights. And sure enough, when I turned 12, that's when I started lifting in the garage.
Do you remember your first workout?
No, I don't. I don't remember my first workout. I do remember, though, he had which he still has, the 20-pound bar that had some whip in it. But I can remember, it was one of those small hole bars. Someone had made it for him at Titanium, the plant in Toronto. And this wouldn't have been my first workout, but I remember when I finally got up to being able to put the 25s on that bar on bench. Big deal. I could do that for 5 sets of 5, and I thought I was really strong. So I would have been.
Well, you weighed 100 pounds, so you were strong, D.
Well, I probably weighed 80 then. It might have been 7th grade, 8th grade. Yeah. But yeah, so when I could do 50 pounds plus the 20-pound bar, so 70 pounds for 5x5, I thought I was strong. I remember that was my first milestone.
I think my first kind of recollection of anything fitness was twofold. I remember my dad lifting the cement weights in the garage after he come home from work.
The old plastic ones
that were filled up? The old plastic ones are filled up. And then I remember, I was telling Netty this before, I remember my mom doing exercise records, which is...
Wow!
Yes.
And it was funny because me and Rachel were just somewhere, my wife Rachel, and one of the songs came on from her record. It was like from like early 80s.
Right.
And it instantly throws me right back when I'm like, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And so it's wild. I don't even know. I told her, I was like, I don't even know who this is, but like it flicks on and it literally, that's what's so cool about music. It takes you back, right? So I remember her literally doing like this exercise record and then doing the rolling pin, doing like an ab wheel, but with a rolling thing you do for bread.
Right.
So she didn't have an ab wheel, but that's what she did. And so I remember those things like vaguely. And then I remember my dad later told me like he benched like 3 1/4 at 165. He was pretty strong. So I remember he moved some good weights. The funny part is they were both into fitness when I was young, like real young, 7, 8 years old. But then my grandfather at 12 or 13, like we moved into with him in 6th grade is when I actually started lifting weights. And they like fell out of fitness. Like neither of them worked out as they got older. It was
kind of a fad for them at one point.
They were into it young and then they just never continued with it, where my grandpa was more of a lifestyle. Like he came home from construction every day and always lifted weights. And so I think at 12 when he was like, hey, it's time for you, you're living here now, because my parents had split up, so I'm living with my grandparents. And he's like, the girls will like it. You're going to be better in sports and you build more confidence. And I was like,
sold.
I'll jump in with you. Let's go.
I like that. I feel like there's a part of the story that you told me before, Cory, and I don't know if this was before you met Dustin or after. It's about a specific shoulder cut. How old were you?
Yeah, that was about then. It was like 6th, 7th grade. I remember like doing, my grandfather, if I think back, he really knew super basic stuff. He only did like, maybe 7 or 8 different exercises, but one of them was upright rows. And I think like, I remember between that 6th and 7th grade kind of area, I remember very specifically like had a wife beater on, wearing those on the regular, was doing an upright row. And I remember seeing like one shoulder cut and just like, this is it. Like I'm in, and I could feel myself, like my confidence. I knew it was something that was going to help me long term. Plus, at the end of the day, it's just like it is now. Like when I get to work out with my son, like you're doing something with your, the male figure in your life that you look up to. And so I look forward to it. It was cool.
Well, speaking of the confidence thing, I mean, that was a big thing for me, weightlifting. Like, growing up, I was literally the smallest kid in the class every single year. And that might have been part of the reason why I didn't really gravitate towards sports, because we play like kickball in 3rd grade in gym class, and I would just get like slaughtered because I was like literally half the size of all the kids. But when I first started lifting weights and I could see some muscles and I felt like physically strong, like it really helped my confidence.
Sure.
Because up to that point, I mean, really even up until probably 9th or 10th grade, I was still like very undersized, you know? So that was something, like, even though I was small, the fact that I felt, physically strong, and like it really helped my confidence just in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it gave me a head start on that too. I think I was, more involved in sports than you were, but it was one of those things where it definitely like helped my swag a little bit as I got 7th and 8th grade. Like I started to feel stronger. I started to look a little better in my basketball, tank top or whatever. And I definitely knew it was going to be a long-term thing for me. And honestly, I think for me, between that and even though I didn't have any like formal training, I hit the bag a lot. And I think it just helped me get out, like I call it angry youth, whether it's from your parents splitting up when you're young to like, I was like just going through things kind of on my own because my mom was always so busy working. And so like, I think it just was an outlet for me to stay out of trouble,
and
honestly.
Just your hormones are changing.
Absolutely.
It's confusing to people. And
it is
you don't
confusing.
Really share it.
It
with
was something
people.
that I could look forward to every day, that I knew would get something positive out. I didn't realize how big of an impact it was at the time, because it was just like Dustin, it was just kind of like a family thing. That's just what you do when you're that age.
I think something that'll be kind of hard for, maybe some of our listeners to grasp was that like back then, if you wanted to learn about working out, I mean, there was no internet.
No, it's magazines.
So you had to either look at like muscle magazines, or like I know my dad had like the Pumping Iron book and the Arnold Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. So if you didn't already know someone that kind of knew something about lifting weights, like there really wasn't a lot of avenues for you to kind of learn what type of workouts you should be doing. Like you really just had to educate yourself, and it was hard to figure out what you were supposed to be doing.
One of the biggest things, I think, when my mom got remarried when I was like 16 or 17, Randy gave me the pamphlet series of Franco Columbo, which I still have. And basically back in the day, that was like their ebooks. Arnold, Franco, all the big bodybuilders, they would do mail order, like the book of chest and, nutrition from Sardinia, talk about it because, Franco's Italian. So like that pamphlet series, which when I met Franco and told him I had it, I think I've got a better version of it than he does. And I still have it preserved at my house. There's like 7 booklets. It goes through each one of their workouts. And that kind of led me down the path of doing the golden era type stuff. And that's what I saw the best results with.
Nice. So let's go when you guys actually meet each other and then become friends. So you don't meet until high school, and your high school started in 10th grade.
I want to
correct?
hear how Dustin remembers it. And then I got a funny story. So.
I'm interested too, because I think there's two different stories. So
Probably.
we need to get a third.
Yeah,
somebody
I'm sure
else
the
from
truth is
Edison
somewhere
High
in the
School.
middle, but
yeah.
So we went to different junior highs. Like we lived in a Edison school district was a couple different high schools that had consolidated. So even though me and Cory would end up going to high school together, we grew up at least 40 minutes apart.
40 minutes apart, probably.
So I had kind of heard of Cory. Like I knew who he was just because I knew that he liked to lift weights or whatever. So I think I kind of heard through the grapevine about that. He was good at sports. So
Probably macking on the same chicks.
There was definitely some overlap between some girls from different.
Probably a whole nother episode.
Yeah, that's something we don't really need to get into on this one. But yeah, so I was aware of who Cory was, and then when the schools consolidated, we went to 10th grade together, and then as luck would have it, we had lifting class together. And so I kind of knew him, and he was like...
this isn't PE, correct? Because that was something
We
I
had a
got
lifting
confused.
class.
You guys had a weightlifting class. Which
Correct.
You guys, if we look back, the stars aligned. You both actually saw that as an option and both enrolled in it.
Oh, yeah.
out of
Rolling
the
that
jump.
fast enough.
Yeah, so we had, Coach Hoover, who was, he was fresh out of playing college football. He played for Eastern Michigan. He was one of the football coaches, and he ran an actual, I think they called it like advanced weightlifting class.
Okay.
So we could schedule the class, and like he'd basically put us through workouts or design the workouts for us or whatever. And kind of an interesting.
Pretty forward thinking, if you think about it. It was 20 years ago, Dave.
Yeah.
It wasn't very common. I bet a lot of high schools didn't have that. I told Netty, I said up here in the suburbs they probably had like PE, whereas now
I had advanced fitness.
You had advanced fitness.
Yes, that's what
Nice.
we weightlift. Yes.
So basically, we're in Coach Hoover's weightlifting class. I was kind of aware who Cory was, and I heard you say swag earlier. Back then they called it cockiness. So I think we both had a little bit of that. Like we're the smaller guys that like to lift weights. We think we got muscles, and we're wife beaters and listen to rap.
We're like the
music,
non-football players that lifted weights that were
Correct.
strong.
Yeah, I think
had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, back then I think if you weren't a football player, it was kind of uncommon to like lift weights year round for sure. So we had weightlifting class together, and I think one of the things Coach Hoover did was like the first week everyone had to like max out like bench, squat, and then we did a dip and chin up contest.
Okay.
And I don't think either one of us won the chin up contest. I feel like there was some like random guy that beat us both on that. But the dip contest came down to me and you, and I feel like both of us almost got 50, and I clipped you by maybe 1 or 2 reps. That's the way I remember it.
It's so funny. That's why I wanted to hear, because I don't remember that at all. My first interaction with Dustin, I don't even know if he would remember, but was in 9th grade. Actually, we were in different middle schools, but there was a dance in Richmond
At the Grange.
I
vaguely remember this.
that Dustin came out to, and I remember hearing about Dustin for the same kind of thing, like lifting weights. We started to know some of the same people because we were about to consolidate. Like our schools had just consolidated.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, like, man, fuck this dude. Like, I'm the weightlifting guy. Like, and I seen him, and plus at that point he's a lot smaller than me, right?
Oh yeah.
So I remember seeing him, and Dustin's definitely his style was a little ahead of mine because I was still pretty country at that point.
Let's back it up to that. So this is the early '90s. We go to a country school, and it was not common to be a country kid or a white kid and listen to rap music at this
all.
point.
No,
it definitely wasn't. I know that you would listen to a little bit of rap music, whatever, but I was in it 1,000%.
Dustin was in it 1,000%.
I had the Carl Kanai jeans, sag down, cross colors, wearing bandanas like I'm Tupac. Like I didn't really give a fuck.
No, and so that I liked about Dustin, but also like my early thing was like, okay, I was just trying to figure it out. Then I remember my first actual like memory of weightlifting with Coach Hoover was, I think it was when we maxed out on bench. There was a board, and I believe Dustin did either 205 or 210, weighing like 130 something. I think 125.
Yeah, I wrestled 119 that year, so I
Yeah.
wasn't heavier than like 120, 125 because I remember I didn't cut any weight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I did over 200.
Yeah, you did over 200 pounds, weighing like 120 nothing. And I just remember thinking like, all right. And then I think that's where like a mutual respect came from. Like, all right, this is a guy that's into it like me and doesn't play football, and that is in it like that. And he knew a lot about it. He actually knew a lot more than I did because his dad taught him more about back training and things. My knowledge at that point was pretty like limited.
Well, I remember like you were like a big like bench and curl guy. Now neither one of us did legs, which is kind of funny, right?
No, I know.
But I at least I think because you hadn't had the Arnold Encyclopedia yet.
Yeah.
And my dad had a copy of that, so I think I kind of knew more about at least how to train upper body more well-rounded.
Yep.
So I remember when you
no legs, so funny.
So the dip contest I do remember.
Oh, we're going back to that now.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I do remember it is because then like. I was happy that I like beat you by 1 rep, but then I can remember like Allison Snyder was like, well, Cory said you didn't go down all the way.
Yeah, you didn't lock out. Yeah.
So there was a little bit of like mutual respect, but also a little bit of like rivalry. So then it was natural that we started lifting together. We were actually close to the same strength. We liked the same things. Like I said, we both liked rap music, and we're kind of different from a lot of the guys in our school that way.
It just made sense, right?
It made sense. So we actually started lifting together in lifting class, and something I was telling Netty the other day, I think you might have been, because you had that September birthday, you were one of the first kids that got your license in our grade. And after wrestling and basketball season ended, I think that's when you started coming down to my house to lift in the garage. And I think you would even pick up on Juan, some of the other guys.
Yep.
So you were kind of like a real catalyst to like everyone starting to come to my house after school to lift weights.
Yeah, it's when we started to have like a legit crew every night after school. And you got to figure that was like a 45-minute drive back to my house from Dustin's. We live on polar opposites of the school district.
Well, probably an hour by the time you drop off Jeremy or Anwar, whoever.
So you just enjoyed it that much. That was like your brotherhood, your team, per se, at that time.
Yeah, that's how it all kind of started.
And you got to remember where we grew up, there was nothing to do. So like this was like the social thing. Even a couple of our buddies that didn't lift weights, they would come and hacky sack or shoot hoops, and then my dad would like cook spaghetti for us.
It's like a positive thing.
My mom would bring home pizza or whatever. Yeah, it was like our after school hangout.
And I'm sure your parents were happy that you guys were hanging out. I mean, you're at home at someone's home, possibly not out on the streets.
I remember kind of like just having free reign at that point. I don't think my mom was so busy working. I mean, she was just happy I wasn't locked up, I think. We were staying out of trouble for the most part, which was good.
Yeah, for the most part, for sure.
Gotcha. So at this point, you guys go all through high school together. You're lifting at your dad's gym. You're lifting at Edison High School. I know you had a friend, Kelly Romney. You're going to her dad's basement too, I think, and lifting there.
Yeah. Did you kind of just have like, I was trying to think about it because I went out there with you a couple times to Kelly's dad's house and
I dated. Kelly was my girlfriend, like I think 8th grade, 9th grade. So that's how I knew her, and she lived by Lig.
And it was kind of like her dad just would let you come over and lift whenever you wanted, right?
Yeah. So it started off when I was dating her cousin. Her dad lifted too, and then basically she was, and then basically Kelly's dad said, he had a homemade gym where he had like built all kinds of equipment.
He still has all
it's
that.
Super sick. And so when we went to Kelly's house, like I couldn't wait to lift because it was even probably more equipped than even maybe the school gym at that time. I mean, it was pretty sick what they had. So I think, we have that one picture of me and Dustin. I think that was we were at a party and we just went down and like hit some weights and got a quick flex on.
And I love that you guys are still friends with Kelly, like to this day. And she's actually in the fitness too. Yeah, it's cool there.
No, Kelly still looks good. She's done great.
So the moral of the story is, parents, if you have your kids around weightlifting, they're probably going to be weightlifters.
Yeah. I think it's an important just like, lifestyle thing that I picked up, and it was kind of weird because, like I said, my family never carried it on except for my grandpa, but I caught on so quick with it. But Dustin's dad and mom have stayed with it the whole time pretty much.
For sure. I mean, my dad still lifts weights. My mom still, is big into hiking and yoga and Pilates and stuff like that. So, but the weird thing is, looking back, definitely like through high school, I never looked at it as like a means for anything else other than like wanting to have big muscles, wanting to look good,
wanting to look like Marky Mark.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. No, you said he was it during that time.
Yeah, I never thought of it as a career thing. Yeah, so the Marky Mark thing is, I can remember this is when I was probably in like maybe 8th grade. At this point, I'm starting to get a little bit of muscles, and I can remember that's when the infamous like Marky Mark Calvin Klein ad campaign
Good
came
vibrations.
out. Yeah. So he's on, like, I remember seeing the commercial on TV, and he's like in his underwear looking ripped. And I remember just thinking, like, that's what I want to look like. And I went, my sister had, I forget, it's like Tiger Beat or something, like some like teen magazine. And there was a picture of him in there, and I cut it out and I wrote on it in a purple pen. I don't know why it was a purple pen, but I said, I'm going to look like this someday. And I hung it on my mirror. So that was like my motivation. And I still have that picture, that same picture.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in your room whenever I went over to his house. I'm like, I want to look like him too. He's awesome. I mean, it was a huge motivation for anybody that age that lifted weights.
Because it's important to let our listeners know, again, like there wasn't any social media. There wasn't even the internet. So
Zero.
You had to have a physical photo of someone to
Right.
be your inspiration.
Talking like
you
96.
Yeah, you couldn't scroll through your phone on a daily and get that
Or
inspiration.
like 94.
Yeah,
this would have been
94.
way
Yeah.
back.
So I think another important thing to say, you guys at this point in time had not ever been in like an actual commercial gym, correct?
No.
Like it had all been, I think
Nope.
that's an interesting
Basement
part.
lifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, basement, garage,
garage.
and even our school. You know, people hear like, oh, they lifted together at the school. Like our school weight room was an old bus garage.
Yeah,
right?
it looks kind of like here, which is why we like it so
There
much.
was there was actual coal mining belt on the floor, just like there is
Same
here at
here.
old school gym. So we haven't had exposure to
Ever.
an actual like gym business up to this point at all.
I don't think I went to my first commercial gym, and it still was hardcore till I was like 17 or 18.
Right.
Yeah, and that was Rocky Road.
Rocky Road or the fitness pavilion.
Yeah, so even then, like your exposure to like an actual gym business is an actual
Still real,
hardcore
still
gym.
real lifters.
Right. So let's talk about that, because it seems like when you guys actually graduated from high school, and then Cory, I know you started working in the coal mine, and then Dustin, you actually went to Cincinnati for a short stint. That's where you guys kind of parted ways a little bit, and then grew up and got some life experience. And then let's talk about that year apart from each other, and then coming back together.
Well, Cory was originally supposed to go to Cincinnati with us.
Yep.
I remember even like moving it when me and Alma moved in the dorms. Like Cory's name was still on the wall.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a
set to
last
go.
minute thing where whatever
I couldn't get like the financial aid or something, or it was like
didn't come together. For you, I
something didn't
remember.
come together, and it was like I was really frustrated about it, but I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do either. So it was a godsend probably. But before that happened though, we did our first powerlifting meet like our senior year, and I really think that
with
ignited-
Hoover,
yeah.
with Coach Hoover.
that ignited a lot, and it was in Shady Side. Dustin did 275 at 142, which was awesome. I did like 250 at 167. We just bench pressed. I don't think we deadlifted, but like I remember thinking like this is a thing.
Is that
Like
the photo that we have downstairs?
It is.
So that is from high school. So if anybody, when
Absolutely.
you are here at Old School of Pataskala, we have a photo of this actual meet.
I
down
just
there.
remember thinking like this is awesome. Like this is a true sport. And that was my first experience. I mean, that was our first meet at 17. I mean, I've probably competed 30 times at least since then. Like I compete multiple times a year. I was absolutely hooked from that point on, because I just remember it felt like we were in the garage, but it was against other people.
Where was the meet at?
It was in like
Shady Side.
it was Shady Side High School, and it was in like a gymnasium. I
And
think.
it was all other just high school students?
Yeah.
Or-
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And I
Yeah,
just
that's
remember
awesome.
thinking like, okay, this is a sport. Where has this been? And wow, this is something I can continue to do. And I just remember like the intensity, because we pushed each other really hard. Like if I got 10, Dustin would get 11. Like it just never failed, right?
When
Whoever,
I
went
can-
first got screwed.
No, I can remember like when you would beat me on stuff. I would be so mad I'd want to cry. Like that's how competitive we were.
We were
but it was
super
like
competitive. We
I
pushed each other.
definitely would want him to beat me because I knew it would bring out the best in me. But like when it would happen, especially if it was like something that maybe I was a little bit better at than you or something. Like let's say you beat me on Skull Crushers, which was like supposed to be my thing.
Yeah.
I would be like inside pissed at you for like a day or two.
Yeah, it was like we had a really good competitive thing in a healthy way early. And that's why we both bench pressed 300 pounds before we left high school, which is not real common for guys our size.
I wanted to be the bench press guy, not you.
Yeah, it was awesome. But I think that for me was a huge turning point, because then I realized that this is something I can do forever.
And I think for me too, the meet. I mean, you got to remember, I didn't play sports when I was young like you did.
Sure.
I didn't start wrestling until 10th grade, and I had a little bit of success as a senior in the sport. But still, I thought back about it. I never placed higher than second in a wrestling tournament. Mm-hmm. So going and doing that powerlifting,
You got first.
I got first,
Yeah.
and I won the
Overall.
MVP, like the Outstanding Lifter Award. It was the first time I'd ever got first in anything. So it was just kind of like
And first over every weight class, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, I've never had this feeling before of like being the best at something. So,
Coach Hoover doesn't realize probably like he taught us, furthered our intensity level, showed us more stuff, and then introduced us to that, which really changed, my concept forever. Because then, once you leave high school, no one competes in anything.
Exactly.
Like my mom came and cheered for me at New Philly this weekend.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
about to be 40.
Yes.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't happen when you leave high school. You don't have the camaraderie. You don't have the competition. You don't have the urgency. People lose it. But I just never did. And I think because of that day, it helped create that.
Without a doubt. And one quick thing to circle back to Coach Hoover before we move on is that, so he was our weightlifting coach 20 plus years ago. He's not that much older than us. Fast forward to present day, he still lives back in the valley, over 2 hours away. His son, who Dalton, stud wrestler, is committed to Northern Illinois for a full wrestling scholarship. He brings Dalton up here to train in our gym, 2 hours each way. So it's kind of crazy to see it come full circle. Like, we still have that picture of our weightlifting team with Coach Hoover hanging on the wall from 96 or 97. And now, here all these years later, Coach Hoover's bringing his son, who's an elite athlete, to train at our gym.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then at that point in time in high school too, like, you guys weren't sitting around with like a business plan, like, we're going to own a gym when we grow up, right? This is not even in your sight at this point, correct?
I can remember thinking like, oh, it'd be great if we like got paid to lift weights, but I didn't think anything like that was possible. We didn't have a lot of like...
we definitely talked about it briefly, like when we were in your garage hanging out, but I don't think we thought it was like actually possible.
Yeah, I think it was like pie in the sky, like, yeah, right thing. Like, growing up back there, I didn't really have a lot of like, other than Smitty, I didn't know anyone that ever started their own business. It's really not an area that like encourages entrepreneurship. So the idea of like how that could happen seemed like so far away that it was just like people sit around and say they want to be a rock star or they want to be whatever,
Right.
I want to be a fitness rock star.
Right. So let's talk about that, because Cory, you didn't end up going to UC. You ended up getting a full-time job, and I think you did then start to have dreams of a profession that you were sharing with people.
I was going to the community college locally, which I was going to school from 8 to 12, and I was working stacking lumber from 1 to 10. So I was working at what's called Danoon Lumber. There is a really successful entrepreneur. He just passed away a couple of years ago that started this lumber company that blew up to like $60 million or something like that in revenue, and he employed this whole town. And so basically, one of my family members is one of the bosses there, so he got me a job stacking lumber. I remember it was like $7 an hour. I was always tired, but what I loved about it was I got to like get a real taste of, before coal mining, a job that a lot of guys were, blessed to have, but they didn't like it. And so I worked with a lot of like really like hardcore, like country ass dudes that, were super respectful of me and were nice. But I got a real good lesson there because the wages weren't very good, and it was kind of brutal with that schedule. And I started noticing that at that point in time, I started to pay more attention to the industry of fitness. Like I remember one of my buddies said, there is a personal training exists in California. I remember him saying that, Nick Dutchin, he said, that's what he said to me because it didn't exist in Ohio that I was aware of, to be honest with you. And so, you figure we're talking like 98. And it was one of those things where I started to kind of get a concept of like, okay, like this might be a possibility, but I was still taking prerequisites, but I was paying for school myself. So I was skipping class like crazy and lifting weights.
Okay.
Because I was pissed because I didn't have enough time because I was going to work 10 hours a day, stacking lumber, which let me paint that picture for you. It's literally like a conveyor belt of endless lumber that you stack, and you just get in line and grab another board and stack it and get in line and do it for like 10 hours. And it is, and at that time I loved rap music. They listened to classic rock. I was like ready to shoot myself.
Right. You're not wearing like your earbuds and
no. It's a whole different animal. So,
to.
But it was really good for me to kind of get a grasp of what I didn't want to do. And then kind of fast forward when I got the job in the coal mine, that was a little bit more up my alley just because my family had done it for years. And I wanted the challenge of it because I knew that was those days were about up. So it was like, I wanted to like experience what my family had done. And it was $14 an hour plus $21 for overtime. And my stepdad's like, Cory, you can work like probably 100 hours a week if you want. They're never going to say no. They have so much work. So I just did the math in my head and was like, all right, here's my concept. I couldn't go to UC. I went down and visited these guys a couple of times, and Dustin can tell you about the pit and stuff they were lifting at, but I just knew like, all right, I felt like I was kind of on my own because I was, and I was like, I need a strategy to get up out of here. And it was like work 100 hours a week, lift weights, save as much money, and then I'll figure it out.
And you're just stockpiling cash then
just
at that point.
Yeah, just stockpiled cash.
Okay.
I can remember, one of the stories, like when I think you might even told me this when you came down, but I remember asking you like, well, what's the coal mine like? And you said, well, like I had to work a 12-hour shift yesterday. The tunnel that I'm in is only 3 foot tall, so I'm on my knees. And there's a conveyor belt bringing coal from deep inside the coal mine. And so for that 12 hours, I'm on my knees, the roof's right above my head, and all I have to do is shovel the coal that falls off the conveyor belt, put it back on the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And I just thought like, that sounds fucking terrible.
It was. I just remember we was in 8 North. It's called, which is one. So the coal mine has 8 miles of tunnels, and they're wider. So they're as wide as this room or wider, but they're at that time the top was like 38 to 42 inches. So it's like working under this table, and so literally my back is touching the ceiling, You have knee pads like a cement tile worker or something, and literally there might be tons of coal that has fell off the belt. And your job is they drop you off and say, see you in 12 hours. And you just make your way down the belt line, and then they find you in a different spot. And I just remember like doing that thinking, is this fucking worth it? Like, this? And I kept telling myself, it's worth it. It's worth it. Remember the $1,000 check you made last week?
That's my question is like, what was going on in your head that whole time? That's so much alone time. Like, you're not talking, you're probably not chit-chatting.
Well, there was another person. They always had you with a buddy, but they were on the other side of the belt, so you couldn't hear. It's so loud, you can't hear it.
Right, it's not like you're BSing with them.
When people hear coal mine, I don't think they have any idea. And I probably still don't even have an idea, but I just remember, like, when I heard Cory's working the coal mine, I pictured, like, oh, he's down there driving a backhoe with his buddy. And, but then you hear that, and you're like, wow, like, that's a different world.
I think, like, what was so good for me, though, was to have to, like, mentally battle through that. I just knew a couple things. Once I started understanding, we had started, you know, halfway through that mining experience, we started kind of talking about the Ohio State thing a little bit. So I had found out that there was a 1-year program in Columbus for exercise specialists. So I knew there was like an end road. I think that had, if I didn't have that and knew I was going to reunite with all my homies, like I might have been a little bit, it might have been tough for me. But I think because I had something clear in sight, and this is how my brain works, I was like, I will just crush this because in 5 months, I'm going to be in Columbus chilling and doing something I want to do.
Right.
And I think once I could understand that, it was really easy for me to just put my head down and like, I literally just lifted and worked. And when I quit the mine that day when I was done, I had like 5-6 paychecks. I hadn't even went to the bank because every time I was going to the bank, like it was closed because I was like working all the time. And if I think back, one of my most hilarious stories is that I worked so many hours, I didn't see the sunlight for literally weeks. Like I was nocturnal. And I remember straight up, I had met Rachel. This is because I worked in the coal mine 2 different times. I went first time, then I came up and got with Dustin. And I had to go home and work for a couple of months. And I remember I had to drive and see Rachel, and I couldn't drive my car because my eyes were so, like they were watering so bad from the light because I literally was like Dracula. Like I had not seen sunlight in so many weeks that it was 4 o'clock. I got off at quitting time. Normally I wouldn't get out till like 10 p.m.
Right, you'd stay.
I had to pull off on the side of the road and let my eyes like
adjust
it took like,
to the light
like for like a half hour. It was like I was crying, but I wasn't even trying to. I was intense. Fucking out of control, Netty.
So meanwhile, while you're, you know, that year you spent, you know, slaving away at the noons and in the coal mine. Meanwhile, I'm down at Cincinnati, living the college life, you know, feeling like, oh man, G should have been a part of this or whatever. But there was a gym down there that we joined that actually had a big impact on me. It was called the Pit. And basically what the Pit was, they'd started it for, I guess, for the UC weightlifting club. At some point, you know, the University of Cincinnati had got rid of all their weightlifting equipment, like upgraded to like new stuff. And they donated it to what was called the UC weightlifting club. And they put it in like the basement of one of the athletic facilities. So it was no lie. It was in this like big, long basement room where like, you know, the bare pipes and everything are overhead. And that was just where a lot of kids, I think it was like maybe 10 or 15 bucks a month to be a member. And one of the first weeks I was there, I met, you know, my buddy Arjuna who lived on my floor, and, you know, he was really into weightlifting, and he, you know, we were like, hey, let's go check out this gym. And I still remember walking in for the first time. So at this point, I'd never had a gym membership in my life. We walked in, there's tons of people in there lifting. I mean, it's all old school equipment. They're throwing around heavy weight, and Biggie, Juicy was blaring on the radio. It was the first time I'd ever really heard rap music in the gym. So even though we were big to rap music at that time, still like at my dad's, we would listen to classic rock because that's what he liked. We had WDV on the radio. And I don't even think we would have had a CD player out in the garage anyway. There was just like some little like boombox radio. So I remember walking in and was just like, holy shit. And there was like some guys, it was mostly college guys, but there were some guys kind of from the inner city that looked like, you know, kind of straight thugs that were in there lifting and like.
Remember that one dude that had like the braided goatee? He was jacked.
Yeah, these guys were super jacked power lifters. It was raw. It looked like they, you know, were straight out of the joint.
Pen,
and, you know, like I said, rap music blare. I remember thinking like, holy shit, like this is awesome. And
found your home.
Yeah. So we, you know, I had a lot of good workouts during that year at the Pit. And that was probably the first year I really learned to start lifting legs. Up to that point, I'd never really squatted or anything. You know, I was real well-rounded upper body, but a lot of the guys I lifted with that year were either football players or ex-football players, so they were real into squat and deadlift and stuff. So I was when I learned a lot more about, you know, just kind of being more well-rounded as a
I remember
weightlifter.
coming down there and being fucking pumped. I was like, this place is legit. I remember still, I bought a T-shirt that had like a dumbbell coming through the ground. Remember that thing?
Oh, we need to find
so it was
that.
like basically like you.
Because it was was it underground?
Yeah, it was in
the
the basement. It was in the basement of the athletic center.
It was super sick. I remember I was so pumped. I bought that T-shirt. The logo is ultra dope.
I wish we could find that. I don't think
we
I
could
ever even
recreate
bought
it.
one.
Yeah.
It was cool.
So Cory, were you training at Rocky Road at that point in time?
So I trained at a couple different places. At that time, there was like it was called S something. It was in Steubenville. It was like they had like a racquetball and weights. And so I trained there for a little while. I started going to Rocky Road, and then I went to this place called the Fitness Pavilion too, which was very similar to our gym. And that's when that year I competed one other time is when I, competed in a push-pull. And there was a guy at, I forget his name. His name was Richard something, but he was like heavy into powerlifting. He was like a 275. I remember I'm like 17. I'm spotting him. He's close gripping 515 pause. I mean, even if he got it stuck on him, there's no way I could have got it off of him. And I remember starting to think like, okay, like, all right, these guys are pretty serious. And he was like, yeah, you should do the meet, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, hell yeah, I already did one meet. I did good. Let's go. So I remember like it was yesterday. I'm like sitting at this meet and I'm like all pumped up and all of these big ass dudes roll in. Like, looks like a biker gang. And I'm like, who? They bring their own bar. They're fucking like 10, guys, huge guys, like 6'7", like 400 pounds, like these huge. And I'm like, who the fuck are these guys? And it was Westside Barbell. And I'm 17 and I'm like, holy shit.
And they rolled into Steubenville.
They rolled in. Louis, when I told Louis, because this was Louis' 50th birthday, he bench pressed 600 pounds in a denim shirt. I was in like the third row. And I'll never forget it because he jumped up in one of these big ass dude's arms and his like arms were like this. And I just remember like thinking, what did I just, like I had no clue who he was, no internet.
Right.
I'd never heard of Westside Barbell. They all were rocking. The logo was dope. And I was just like, and the intensity, I'll just never forget it. It was so intense. And it was so serious. And they were playing like death metal. And it was inside a trailer park. Like Fitness Pavilion, you drove through a trailer park and there was a gym in the middle of it. And when I told Louis years later after I met him, he was like, oh yeah, we used to call that the Trailer Park Nationals. And he remembered exactly. I was like, once I got to know him, I said, I was there on your birthday when you benched 600. I remember it like yesterday. He was like, you was? I'm like, yeah, I'm from there. And I was a member of that gym. And so that was like my first experience. I figured like I'm 17, 18. Not only am I coal mining, but I get to witness something to that level of that, that kind of intensity. And I mean, I couldn't get enough of it.
Here's the other thing to remind people that are listening. There's no iPhones.
Yeah.
There's no digital cameras.
Right.
So like...
Man, I wish I had a video of it.
Right. Could you imagine having that
Right.
on your Snap story? Louis at 50, benching 600. But
Yeah.
back then it didn't exist. Like you wouldn't think to go out and like buy a camera for a powerlifting event that you were doing. Like...
Nope.
You might buy like a disposable camera like when we have prom or something. Other than that, like, so there's so many things like that happened early on with us that like there's no record of it other than
No documentation.
yeah.
Right. For instance, like this just shows where the fitness industry was. Cory, if you can tell the listeners, when you did decide, hey, I'm going to move to Columbus, I'm going to go do the 1-year program at Columbus State, you were telling people, I love the story of you telling the people in the coal mine what you were going to do.
Oh
and
yeah,
who they
I
compared you
I told
to.
the miners because I knew that where I was. Honestly, I think that was the biggest key for me. I knew where I was heading. I knew it was a means to an end, and I can conceptualize that with my brain like the best of them. I can have ultimate discipline when I know where I'm going. And I think my whole life I've done a good job of have the next thing, and that was the next thing for me. And it's like I was like, yeah, I want to be a personal trainer, and they basically only knew one personal trainer, and it was Richard Simmons. For all you young people that
Google
that are
Richard
listening,
Simmons.
Google Richard Simmons. And I was just like, I remember the coal mine, you have an elevator and it goes down 600 feet. So it takes a few minutes. So I'm in the back of the elevator and you're a red hat, which means you're like college help.
Okay.
So you're like basically like, nothing. And so you got these old 60-year-old coal miners, hardcore, and they're like asking me what I want to be when I grow up. And I tell them that. They're all making fun of me, telling me I want to be Richard Simmons. And I had earrings in at that time. I forgot to take them out. So they're making fun of me for that. I just remember just like sinking in the back of it. But what they did like though is because of my work ethic and how strong I was, those guys always would kind of take me with them on jobs. They knew, I got the shitty work, but they knew I had some oomph to me. So they did respect me. And my stepdad is a weightlifter also, works a ton of hours, had mad respect from everybody in the coal mine. So it was a good experience, but they also gave me what I needed, which I was a young dude working with real men, and that's a whole nother level.
Especially working underground, right?
Yeah, they have their own set of rules down there.
Exactly. So let's go to when you guys, Dustin, you leave UC. You're not feeling
I think
it, right?
about halfway through the year. Even though I loved the pit and had some good friends down there and stuff, I knew Cincinnati wasn't the place for me. It was too far from home. And I had we had some, and actually I think the first time I came up and visited Ohio State, I think you came up the same weekend. I think we came up for Michigan weekend, right?
Yep.
And so that was, really early on in the school year. We came up for Michigan weekend, and I just remember thinking like, wow, this is what I pictured college being like.
Dope.
It was dope. It was we're going to all the, me and G are up here reunited. We're going to all these house parties and stuff. And I remember thinking like, yeah, Cincinnati.
And there was like real in the music, and it was like more aligned with us. We're like, oh wait, we're normal here.
Right.
Wait, okay. Like that's what I remember feeling like. I come to Columbus and I was like, wait, everybody likes the stuff I like. This is awesome. We didn't feel like we stuck out. At home, we were like outcasts.
Yeah, and I felt that at Cincinnati too. But you still being back home, you're still kind of an outcast at this point. But I just remember thinking like the wheels were already turning. Like, man, I'm going to transfer to Ohio State. You said you were going to come up here and go to Columbus State. So we kind of set that plan in motion. And something too I want to mention, you did come down and visit Cincinnati a couple times, and I remember you came down. I think I kind of lined it up this way. You came down for Valentine's Day, and you brought Julie Swift down, who was my girlfriend at the time, who I am now married to and have kids with. So
if I remember that weekend, that was also a weekend I think all your shit got stolen out of your car. Do you remember when you?
That was a different weekend, but yeah.
I remember that was also one of the things you're like, well, I mean, because Cincinnati was pretty rough around campus. At that point.
It's changed a lot, but that was a reality check, getting like everything stolen out of my car, and
somebody like broke your windows out and like stole all your
system. And then they basically like confronted me like, what are you gonna do about it? And I was like, I'm gonna drive to the cop station. It was
a reality of the
it was
city.
a reality of the big city, for sure. So so basically I knew Cincinnati wasn't a place for me. I wanted to come to Ohio State. I wanted to be like, just the campus felt magical to me. I remember thinking like, I feel like I'm in a movie about college right now.
It's a lot closer to home too.
A lot closer
Cincinnati's
to home.
a hell of a haul from home. It's like a solid 4 hours.
Yeah, 4.5 maybe. So basically we make plans for that. We come up here. We got a group of our buddies. Some of our other buddies we hung out with from high school. And then I remember we met up here and like found a townhouse over on 12th, 180 East 12th. I always remember that address for some reason. Then we moved in together, and that was it. And that's how we ended up here.
180 East 12 has multiple hilarious stories. One that wasn't so funny is when we got robbed at gunpoint, though, by the campus killer.
That one
was really scary. My mom wanted me to come home the next day, and I was like,
can't
blame
her.
I can't. Yeah.
That'll be a good one for another podcast.
That story was intense. So 180 East 12th, is that where we have the basement gym? Is that
correct?
We have the crawl space there? Gym, okay. So Cory, you start going to Columbus State at that point in time. Yep. Dustin, you start going just full time to OSU. Yep. At this point in time, is anybody asking you guys for like personal training advice or weight training? Does anybody see that maybe you guys well, I'm just saying, like, are you guys starting to see like, hey, maybe we know a little bit more than other people? Like, did you go to Jesse Owens South?
So
you worked out there? Or?
I think within like our circle of friends, we were the ones that kind of like led the workouts and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, I know Cory was already thinking along this lines of being a personal trainer. I still didn't even think that was a possibility for me, or even I was still like in my head thinking, okay, I'm going to go to school and be like an English teacher, so I can have the summers off. That's like really how I thought, right?
Okay.
But we had a little gym in our basement in the crawl space. We had a bench and a curl bar and a heavy bag and just a couple other things. So like when you would go down in the basement of our townhouse, there was a laundry room, and then the block wall about halfway up, you could crawl through it, literally into the crawl space. And the ceiling was I knew it was exactly like 5'9" because I was the only one that could stand all the way up. Yeah. So like if Cory was standing up, he had to be like in between the rafters.
Still higher than a coal mine though.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a straight gravel floor with like a vapor barrier over it, and we put our weights in there, and that's where we would lift. And we went and tried like some of the campus gyms. I remember we went to
Jesse Owens South a couple times.
Yeah, did you get kicked out?
In that Gold's Gym Indianola.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did actually. Like I remember even when we went to Jesse Owens South, it didn't feel right to us. Like it felt really weird. We got kicked out one time, like because Cory ran and like jumped and hung from the basketball hoop, or And,
I remember that. It's funny. I did.
Yeah.
I went and hung on the rim.
You went and hung on the rim. They were like, you guys are out here.
Yeah, that's funny.
But I can remember even when we went there, like it just felt weird. There's all these people just sitting around doing cardio with their headphones in, and I don't know, it didn't feel right to us. And so we wanted to try, like, there was a Gold's Gym on Indianola. Mm-hmm. And we're like, hey, let's go buy a pass and go try this out.
We were pumped because I'm thinking Gold's Gym, like
right.
Golden Era Gold's Gym.
Yeah, we'd only seen Gold's Gym in the Pumping Iron book.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're picturing the
we think we're going
Gold's
to that.
So I'll never forget. We walked in, and of course, we're going to go to the bench,
Yeah.
And the benches were teal and purple,
yep.
and there was a Rod Stewart song playing.
Yeah.
And
fuck this.
Did you guys even stay for a whole workout?
No, we did a couple sets, and I can remember thinking like these dumbbells are so clean. Yep, they were slippery. It was like I couldn't hold on to them.
I was trying to do pull-ups and the bar was too clean. I was like, we can't fucking work out here.
Yeah, there's like no rust, no dirt on anything.
We just straight left.
So we literally left, and I remember thinking like.
That's a letdown. That's a letdown.
Oh, it's a major letdown.
Well, plus we paid, you got to figure we're college students this time. We paid $5 to lift there.
Yeah.
So we like forfeited our $5, even though like it was probably the last $5 in our wallet.
Yeah.
So we're like, it's not even worth it. Let's go back home and lift in the basement.
Yeah. I know it was a huge letdown. I remember I was super pumped.
Yeah. I remember it was almost like like a disillusionment moment because we thought it was going to be so cool. Mm-hmm. And we got in there and it was terrible.
Terrible.
So terrible we couldn't even finish our workout.
That's next level terrible. So you guys, at this point, let's talk about your first like fitness job. I think not together. I think G, you led this. You went to Scarborough Fitness Club.
Yeah. So when I was at Columbus State, it was kind of funny because I was still kind of a mess because I had never really been away from home. So I'm like drinking 40s and Mickeys. I'm like smoking Newports.
He had a collection of Mickey's bottles.
You're just like, because you're on your own in the city,
like,
or
don't
like
give a fuck. Like, and the funny thing is about me, I go from like 6 months of being a wild man. Like I would roll to class smelling like smoking beer.
Which is
funny. I know.
Now that you mention that, I remember thinking whenever you were like talking about getting a job as a personal trainer, like this is our first year living. I remember thinking like, Cory's has the worst nutrition in the house. Like he smokes cigarettes, he eats nothing but ice cream and drinks beer.
That was a rebellion, I think, against.
Yeah, I was just for sure. I was just pumped to be on my own. But I remember at one point like they were talking about internships, and I was like, man, I better get my shit together. Like, but I was in at that time. Columbus State was a trial program, the 1 year I was the first year of it.
Oh,
we didn't even have books for part of our classes. There was 7 people in my class. Don Labenthal was the main teacher who had previously ran Scarborough East.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened was he was like, your style, like I can tell the way you train, intensity, I think you would match up there. Even though Bryce Road seemed far as hell from downtown at that point, he's like, there's a trainer there that graduated from Akron that's doing pretty good, and I think you should go there and get the desk job to learn from him.
Was that Reggie Young?
That was Reggie Young, yeah. So I got a desk job at Scarborough East making $6 or $7 an hour.
When you say desk job, that's probably like greeting guests when they come in, just
folding towels.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I did laundry, and I just watched everything Reggie did.
Gotcha.
So that's how it all started.
And then how did you go on from the towel boy to actually training? What was the progression there?
Didn't take super long because Reggie was really busy. I mean, he had probably like 40 clients, plus he used to do like Taibo type stuff.
Okay.
So he was easily making over $100,000 a year. And we were in an environment where once you trained, you just had rent, which isn't very common nowadays. There's always percentages, right? Mm-hmm. I paid, I remember Reggie had like Irene, who is Marianne's sister. Mm-hmm. He didn't like training her because she wasn't very serious. He was on this tip where he didn't want to train people that weren't serious.
Because he thought he was
already at a different level. So I was like, well, shit, I'll take her, and it was $20 an hour. And I just remember Irene gave me for 10 sessions $200, and I was like, oh shit, it's on. Because remember, $21 an hour is what I was making in the coal mine, and I knew how that added up because I was making really good money. And I just remember she was, I believe, either my first or second client that was real. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, once I started understanding, like, okay, this is real, then I started like running flyers off and getting more serious about it. And then, I literally went from, folding towels to having like between 3 to 5 clients, of runoff from Reggie and learning from Reggie. And Reggie also would go on vacation and stuff and have me fill in for him. And so I got a decent amount of just practice by just being around.
So he was your Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
I mean, you had his overflow in his time that he was down.
No question.
And I'll tell you,
he was good too. He was good.
Well, up to this point, you and I had, we basically had lifted like bodybuilders. That was kind of all that we knew. Mm-hmm. He was the first person I remember seeing like do personal training where like he could have 3 or 4 clients going at the same time doing different workouts.
He was a master.
Cycling them through and like having them do different style workouts. Like how do you train, like a 60-year-old woman? We had no idea.
Right.
So
he taught me how to work the room with multiple clients because he could keep the rates down to 30, 35, but have 4 and 5 people at a time. So it was group training really, but it wasn't because somehow he would be able to make it individual because the way he set it up, and he sold fitness. He was positive. Reggie was really good. Mm-hmm. And so I was fortunate enough to not have a clipboard trainer as my first Because, I mean, I basically walked into a guy that was making easily 6 figures, understood it. His roommate in college was Jason Taylor, who just went in the Hall of Fame for football from Akron. Like, he was a high-level athlete. He got it. He was cool. And like
he was a bodybuilder, too.
He was a bodybuilder, too. He did shows. So he was just, I mean, I don't know that I could have had a better entry point to it. But I learned a lot of not how to do stuff from Reggie, too, which, you know, as Reggie would miss appointments and he was a little shaky at times and he had definitely some pitfalls. Once again, I was always just consistent. I was even that way then once I gave up the Mickeys and Newports.
Right. So at that, and like, how old are you at that point in time? Like 19 or 20?
19 or 20.
So like at 19 and 20, just because like the G I know today, like, did you ever like call in sick? Like, hey, Irene, like, I'm not going to make it there today.
Unless we had like some super stuff going on campus. I was pretty, no, I think my earliest appointment was like 7 maybe.
That was one thing I do remember though, is like sometimes like I would be almost like the devil on your shoulder. I would like make him go out.
Shocker.
Like we would go
shocker.
Like we would, like I would make him go out the red zone on a Friday night. Yeah. So we'd go hit red zone. He'd be like, I gotta be at Scarborough at 7. I'm like, gee, you'll do it. And I remember thinking like at some point in the night when we're out and we're hammered, like he's gonna miss his appointment tomorrow. But no, he would get up. No, he never did.
I felt so fortunate to be able to get paid to lift weights because that's what I've been telling all these people I was gonna do. That I was like, it was so important to me that I that's the problem is I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And eventually that had to change a little bit where I had to say, okay, Saturdays I can do it or whatever, you know, but I had to get more disciplined because, you know, I went from being at Scarborough to, you know, 6-8 months later having my own joint and everything changes then, you know what I mean? So like I was definitely like pretty serious at that point, but I really went from being kind of a train wreck to being my own businessman like literally in about a year. Right. It was pretty wild.
And Dustin, you took over as towel boy, correct?
Yeah, I became the Scarborough towel boy.
Okay.
And honestly, I think I got that job. Like at the time, I might have even still been working at the YMCA, which we lifted at there.
Yeah, we had a meet there too.
But I remember, you know, I worked at the L&W Ward YMCA out on Broad Street. I was a lifeguard there, and you know, they had a good weight room there. We actually did a powerlifting meet there and stuff that same year.
Yep.
But I remember once you started kind of training full time in Scarborough, I went and took over that desk job there, and I did it more or less just so me and you could lift weights together. You know, so I don't think really had a concept of becoming a trainer at that point.
Okay.
Well, I think Dustin, you had a different path. You thought you were going to be a teacher. That's what you were into.
Right, for sure.
And so it was. You know,
I wanted the summers off.
So, but let's go through when the first T3 actually opened due to some conflict at Scarborough.
Yeah, so I had about a year later. You know, I'm like 20 and a half-ish. I think I had about 20 clients.
And you completed the program, right? At Columbus State, like that's done?
Completed the program. Okay. I was actually, a lot of people don't know this, I was signed up to do massage. Like I was actually going to go through massage school and I was going to have, this is good. I was about to have the high-end program. My whole plan, my business was get these like hot rich women to pay me to like personal train them and massage them.
Oh my god!
had you took the modeling trip to New York yet? This is right around the same time, right?
Yeah. So I think right around then's when. So all of this kind of happened together. It was like when I was like 20. Rachel, which was my girlfriend at the time, was working at Long's Bookstore, which was on campus. She had a friend that knew the people from the Arnold Classic. And he's like, hey, I know your boyfriend's into lifting weights. You think you'd want to sell programs at the Arnold? And he gets a VIP pass with me, and I got to go into all this stuff. And so I was like, yeah, of course, like sign me up. So like as that's happening, you know, I know the Arnold Classic's coming up. I'm training a good bit of people. And then like, you know, Scarborough kind of, I interviewed for the manager position, which was $9 an hour. So in my head, I was like, I'm running this joint anyway. You know, I'm only 20, but I'm like, I could get paid $9 an hour. Plus do my personal training. I was paying $200 a month rent. I was like, this is going to be a game changer. And they passed over me for the job. And it was so easy. Like I could have easily done it. And they hired some numbnuts. But his whole plan was to squeeze me. That was his sales. Like, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to take 30% of Cory's money. We're going to get other trainers. I remember he like got all these pop machines and like was doing all this like flashy stuff, like trying to make like he was doing something. And I just remember when he came to me and I was like, it's funny because I wouldn't have picked to open my own gym then. See, that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like they hear me talking about opening a gym when I was 20 or a studio. Like that wasn't really my plan. I was forced into it. And instead of rolling over for this idiot to take my money, I stood up and was like, F you, I'm going to do my own thing. And that's literally like he told me that was going to happen. I didn't say anything to him. I was just in my head thinking, yeah, right, dude. And I walked out that day and just started driving around looking for places, like out the gate.
I can still remember, us sitting down at 15th and you kind of telling me, because I still work the desk there. I don't think I had any clients or anything yet, but so I was aware of the situation with that guy, and I didn't like him either.
Yeah, fuck you, Keith.
Yeah.
But thank you.
But I can remember you telling me what your plan was. You're like, yeah, I drove around Bryce Road and I found this place right up the street I'm going to rent. I remember distinctly thinking, like, my duty as your friend has to be to talk you out of it. It's like, it's not going to work.
Right.
And I remember thinking, you're going to lose all your clients. They're not going to come there. You're gonna go in debt.
I don't remember you being like a negative thing, though. I don't remember that.
He's realist. No. Yeah, just.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's just the way I remember. I remember thinking that it definitely was not going to work.
This is a question Dustin actually just answered for me yesterday. Tell everybody what T3 stands for.
It was something I made up in college. We had to do an assignment, one that I actually did, of our own personal training. Like, I was not a good student. I don't think that would.
I think Rachel made the sign.
I was going to say, are you sure you did this?
I had like glitter on it.
After I met Rachel on spring break, I didn't go to school for a month. And my teacher called me and asked me if I wanted to come back. Because I think he knew, like...
He didn't sleep at our house for a month.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
I think he knew that I was, like, going to be in the industry. Like, I had some, like, a possibility to be good at it. Mm-hmm. He just knew I just didn't care.
Right.
Because I was already making money. So the thing is like, I found out there was no law in Ohio that you needed anything. So I was like, F it. So I punted school and I was like, I'm out.
Right.
And he was like, well, do you want to come back and, like, finish? And I was like, yeah, if you'll let me come back, I'll come back next week. So I go back to school, and it's funny because Don's still there.
Right.
So, like, he's seen everything. So it's pretty hilarious. But, yeah, so I go back to school. I finish up the thing. We start the gym. I get to go to the Arnold's. Like, all this kind of happens at the same time. All my clients were willing to come. The same thing I told Jason and Riley. Like, all my clients and people knew me, like, contributed dumbbells and wanted to help me be successful. You know, the space was 900 square feet. It was $600 a month. Mm-hmm. I did like a really easy kind of metrics on could I pay my bills if I only had 8 clients from 20 and all that kind of stuff. And it was still always all over the place. But to me, my whole setup was like, I don't got anything to lose. If I screw this up, what are they going to get? I don't got anything.
Right.
My parents ain't got nothing. I got nothing. What do I have to lose? That's really what my... like kind of what my like brain was saying.
Your worst
time.
Case scenario is going back home
and working in the
what
mine.
You've already done.
And if I had, honestly, when I signed the lease, I was like, if I have to go home and coal mine, I can still pay this and live with my mom's.
Right.
I mean, that literally is what I thought. And I was like, F it, let's go.
It was like a do or die moment.
It was a do or die moment. It literally was, because there was no one going to come save me. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's it. I think that's what a lot of people, that's why I'm glad we're talking about this stuff, because a lot of people don't realize these type of things about me because they only know what they've seen on social media. Mm-hmm. I did this stuff for literally like 10 years, sun up to sundown, grinding all this, going through trying to be half in college, half not in college. And it was a little trying, because even Dustin, who's an amazing business partner at that time, he couldn't catch what I was trying to do. And I wasn't mad about it.
But he was still doing, you were still doing much more of the college experience.
Yeah. So once he opened T3, then I was like, okay, well now I kind of saw my opportunity.
Transitional training technique. Yeah. Which means nothing, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
It doesn't mean anything. That's why I three'd it.
T3.
It's so good.
So then I think I left Scarborough then and went with G and started working as a personal trainer. He would just kind of feed me some of his overflow, kind of like Reggie did to him at first. Mm-hmm. And I was at that point now really learning from him, like how to train people. But even at that point, I was still like, it wasn't 1 foot in training, 1 foot in college. It was like 2 toes in training, and then like the rest of it was in the college life. So I still didn't really look at it as like, it was more just like this was like my college job type of thing, was the way I looked at it. I didn't really take it as serious as I should have. So
I was in that place, Netty, for almost 3 years building that clientele. And then I remember when I upgraded out, because I was in the shopping plaza, like inside.
In the back.
In the back. You couldn't even, they were using it as a ladder closet for the rehab of the shopping center when I rented it.
It was behind Blades, that hair studio.
It was behind a hair studio, which I did like because there was women coming through there, which was cool. And then when I moved out front, I remember we were literally stepping over each other because I had like 5 or 6 trainers paying rent. We had a bunch of clients coming through there, and I upgraded to a place that was like 2,500 square feet. That was really nice. It was in the front of the mini mall. I remember I was paying like $1,500-$1,600 a month rent. So it was a pretty big deal for me, but I definitely like stepped up, and my business was growing, and I knew it was like a real thing. And then we started to compete in bodybuilding then too, and so there was a lot of stuff that was just all positive, but it took a long time.
Well, let's peel that back a little bit, because again, there's no social media. So you're very young. How are you, building a reputation and getting clients? I mean, it's still a struggle no matter, what year you are starting a business in. Being able to get clients is always going to be that hard part. So how are you doing that?
Networking groups. So I would go to, the Barter Network. I was in the Chamber. I was going to those things probably 3 days a week. Plus, at that time is when I started kind of competing locally a little bit. So I started to kind of, meet more people, and I had a knack for posing. So people would come in and kind of do some of that stuff. And I think that I did a really good job of having people bring their friends. I think that I did anything and everything. Plus, I was reasonable and I was consistent. And a lot of personal trainers are just straight flakes.
So like your rates were reasonable?
Yeah, they were like $25. I mean, but I had multiple people at the same time, just like Reggie kind of taught me. And I think once again, Reggie, I'm telling you, he kept screwing up and his people kept coming to me.
Gotcha.
Marianne. I mean, there's a list of them that were there for literally like a decade of Reggie's clientele that just kept migrating towards me.
I think too, when you think about marketing, like this is the pre-Instagram era. So I was telling Netty the other day, my first business cards I ever got, on the back of them was a picture of me posing from a bodybuilding show.
Because I had pictures on all mine.
Yeah, so like that was the only way you could show people that, hey, I was a bodybuilder and hey, I got muscles underneath my sweatshirt or whatever. So when you were at Kroger and you start trying to like pitch to the person next to you in line, like, hey, I'm a personal trainer, blah, 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 you'd give them your card, it would have your picture on it. Yeah. It's kind of funny to think back. Like
something that Cory probably, I mean, he's not going to say about himself, but Cory's people skills are out of this world. So
Thanks, Netty.
Most people see him on social media and they don't understand his one-on-one interaction is by far probably some of the best I've ever seen. So that's probably
definitely helped in that business.
and that's something that I obviously never got to train with you as a client, but I can tell, all of our listeners out there, that is something that you are, you excel at beyond most people. And people don't see that on social media, but once someone meets you and has that one-on-one, I think they're hooked. And that's why T3 was successful. That's why OSG is successful. And that's why Cory G himself is successful.
I think that helped because I could tell like once my retention was really high.
Well, because people could tell that you genuinely cared.
I did. Yeah, I think that's the key.
And
we
you
really wanted to help people.
Yeah, and you guys live it too. That's the other thing.
Yeah, we weren't faking it. I think people found that out real quick. And it was like, I think once I understood that at a pretty young age, I was like, if I care about these people like family and they'll work hard, they piss me off because they won't eat right and they're complaining and bitching and all that stuff. But, I was pretty straight with them, but they could tell I genuinely cared. And I would, here's what I learned pretty young. You could be, as a personal trainer, the most positive person they talk to all day. They might be having problems at home. They might hate their job. But when they come to see you, it has to be a personal interaction of positivity. And so
sometimes that's almost more important than the workout.
It is. So I realized that pretty young, and I think that helped me a lot.
And I think that does to
still
me,
even to today, it
even overflows on social media.
For sure.
Dustin and I talked about it last week. Like when, let's say, Join a Real Gym makes a post, or you make a post, or Dustin makes a post, like there are still like, we might be that contact for someone in their lives. Like that's the constant positivity that they get. They might not get it from their parents or their girlfriends or their wives or husbands or at work. And so we have to kind of remember that we don't, a lot of people aren't surrounded with the positivity that we are.
All of you, young fitness impersonaros or whatever that word is out there that are listening, quit being negative on social media. I never put anything negative out on social media. Like you got to remember, like the people you're trying to reach, the people you're trying to inspire, they don't need to hear about your problems, about how you're struggling with your diet or whatever. Like you need to be positive if you want to make an impact on people.
It's a big key. One-on-one though is a huge key to my success back then, because I guarantee like my knowledge for training a little shaky.
Right, but I think that's in any profession. If you have that one-on-one, you're going to excel. So you guys, Dustin, you start training at T3 also, right? You leave Scarborough, you bring over some of your clients, and you're there.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm still just doing it part-time. I mean,
maybe 4 or 5 clients at the gym.
Just a few, because I'm still in school at this time too. You got to remember, Cory did a 1-year program, so he's already done. I still got another 2 or 3 years at Ohio State. So,
and then at this point, isn't this when you do get a call from a friend that there's a potential gym closing and that you guys might be able to open like an actual
I had a client
gym
at that gym as well. So a lot of people don't realize, like, even though I had my own gym, I was driving to Columbus North Sports Club on the north side of town for evening clients 3 days a week. And I had one client at Amazing Fitness in Pataskala.
This is actually before that, and I forgot this story until I was telling it to Netty the other day. So about 6 months before we got the Amazing Fitness call,
Yep.
I got a call from a buddy of mine in Cincinnati, and the pit, which we talked about where I lifted, that the 1 year that I was down there, they were getting ready to close that because they were like tearing down that building or something.
Yep.
And so he had an opportunity to possibly buy that equipment. And the idea was he was going to bring me and Cory in as partners. He was going to move to Columbus, and we were going to try to open it maybe in Clintonville or something.
Yeah. Close to campus.
Yeah, close to campus. That was kind of our plan. So we're going to have all this equipment from the gym. So I remember I was like, Cory had lifted at the pit the one time or a couple times that he came down to visit me when I'm at school there. And now this is, fast forward 3 or 4 years later. So I was like, hey, let's take a trip down so you can meet my buddy. We'll get a workout in at the pit, which kind of ironically, that was when I hurt my back the first time. Deadlifting, yeah. So I've had that injury ever since. I was probably 21 or 22. And we went and lifted. And I remember I was all pumped up because at this point I had just been a part-time trainer for you. And I thought, and it was the first time I ever really thought about us owning a gym. Now I'm thinking, all right, we're going to have all this sweet old equipment from the pit. I'm bringing my other buddy in. The three of us are going to be partners. I remember us like sitting around dinner that night talking, like, yeah, we're all going to get Range Rovers.
Yeah.
We'll put up a sign that'll say Range Rover parking only.
Yes, I remember that exact fucking conversation. That's so funny.
And the funny thing was, a couple months later, I did buy a Range Rover because I was obsessed with it then. Yeah. But I think kind of the takeaway from it is, we had a good time down there lifting or whatever, but for whatever reason, you didn't feel good about it. The training studio was still, it was blown up at this point. And I remember driving back.
What I could conceptualize of blowing up.
Yeah,
I was working full time.
Yeah, you were making a good living at it,
Absolutely.
And it was an independent business. You had a little buzz around town. People were starting to know who you were.
For sure.
But I remember driving back, and you were just like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I just don't. It's not right for me. But I remember you telling me, you were like, hey, man, because I was still trying to talk you into it.
Sure.
You were like, hey, if you still want to do it, you can do it. That's fine. Like, you can partner up with them and you guys can open that gym.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been butthurt at all. I just knew for some reason it didn't feel right to me. And I think because I was already like basically 3 years ahead of you guys.
For sure.
And that was part of it.
But I remember it was like kind of like a crossroads moment because I could have still like went and partnered up with that guy who I was great friends with and like
who owns a gym today and is a good business guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's
a slouch.
Yeah, fast forward this far, he owns his own gym, very successful in Cincinnati, and Calibrated CrossFit. We'll give him a little shout out there.
Sure.
But I just remember thinking, like, even though there's a great opportunity, like, I think I'm going to be better off long run to stay aligned with you, whatever that means. And I still don't think it. I thought like, okay, well then me and you will open a different gym.
Yeah.
I just knew that meant like still training with you. You had so much momentum, and I felt like I was learning so much training there at T3. I didn't think it was the right move for me either. So I was like,
well, and also I was showcasing that it was possible,
right?
For all of us, really. So that was the big key. Like it was working, actually.
So it was actually good that I was too scared to go off and do it on my own.
No, and I think again for our listeners, that's important. That sometimes like that first thing, like it's bright, shiny, you're excited about it, and then if you just sit back and really go with your gut and think about it.
I can't remember why though. Like I can't put my.
It was probably like a gut.
It just didn't. I think because I knew how hard it was to do what I was doing already. I already understood it because I've done it for years, and I think I knew I was going to be overstretched. And I was scared about that.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, because I think the plan would have been we were going to open that, but because it was going to be on campus, you would have lost all your East Side clients. So you were going to keep T3 too.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
two places.
Yeah, it was going to be like he was going to have T3, and then we were going to open what would have been our original iteration of Old School Gym around campus somewhere.
And I think another part of the story, which again I think our listeners should take a note, is Dustin. You had another opportunity to like partner with G, and I think he kind of decided not to do or you were going to buy into T3 a little bit, I think, and then he was like, hey, I'm already doing this. So
yeah, this was something else I had, I kind of forgot about till me and you were going over this timeline. So when G moved from the small T3 to like the bigger storefront version, I remember he wanted to bring me in as a partner and our buddy Josh who was training there. Yeah. And I remember it was just something like we were going to each pay in like $500 or something like to get some new equipment, and then we're going to be three-way partners. And in retrospect, I definitely was not ready for this at this point. I was still in college, and I was still very much in like the party and college lifestyle. But G wanted to kind of like present an opportunity for us. And I remember like 2 or 3 days into it, like right at the very beginning, Rob Dunsmore, who was your client, who was pretty knowledgeable guy.
He helped us a lot.
Yeah, I remember he kind of pulled you aside and was like, G, what are you thinking? Like, you built this thing yourself.
Yeah.
Like, don't bring these guys in your partners. Have them keep working for you. And I remember you just kind of came to us and like gave me and Josh our money back. And we're like, hey, man, like, it's just not the right time for you guys to partner with me. And I don't
remember this. I don't remember this like that. I don't remember it all actually.
No, I mean, I distinctly remember it now. Like totally forgot about this till like we started going through the timeline. But I remember like not being butthurt at all. I remember just kind of like, I think there might have been a part of me that was a little bit relieved because I think deep down I knew I wasn't ready to be a partner in the business yet either.
But again, this is just that, another thing was presented that didn't necessarily go your way right out of the gate. You stayed true to G as a friend, and they're like, hey, this just isn't the right time. So people that want to start their own things, you're going to feel like the world's against you sometimes because an opportunity is going to be there and that's going to be pulled away. And that's just kind of the nature of it.
Vaguely, D, because I think when the other opportunity came up to involve you with the original old school, I think I remember thinking, now it is time.
Right.
I think it made
this would have been
sense.
like a year later, 2 years later or something.
So this is when you guys, the amazing fitness is the amazing opportunity.
Probably 6 months after we turned down, buying that equipment from Cincinnati. By now, we didn't have the Range Rover parking sign, but I did have the Range Rover. And Cory, you were training like at a couple other places around town.
A couple other places around town. And this lady had reached out to me that was in Pataskala. I'd never even been to Pataskala before. And she was like, I forget how she even heard about me. And she was like, can you come out here? And I was like, sure, for 30, I think I charged like 35 because I had to drive or whatever. And I was like, so I remember walking in the original old school gym and I was like, I mean, they had no members. There was 2 members. And she was like helping clean it and I was training her and the gym was just epic. And I was like, I remember going in thinking, I like have to buy this or, be involved in it. I just remember loving it. Now,
the guy who ran it at that point, he wasn't a gym guy.
Wasn't the gym guy. He actually was like a shady car salesman dude. He had a bunch of problems. He was in trouble with the law. But he was trying to put cash into something. It was really cool. It was done well. He had bought a lot of nice equipment. He had a good vision for like the nature of the gym. I just remember telling Dustin, I was like, man, if this thing ever is available, like I don't know that I can't buy it. Like it was way too awesome. Now,
and I think all it took was for you to like mention something to the guy once, and he was like, "Yeah, give me 10 grand cash, it's yours."
Well, he was not indicted yet, but he was being looked at hard for some stuff, and it was right time, right place. He was like, "Yeah, I'd love to get rid of it for 10 grand cash."
So
years later, we ended up training someone who worked for the Attorney General, and she was like, "Oh yes, like I've been to this gym before. We were," or she's like, "I've seen pictures of. We were investigating the former owner."
Yeah. So at that point in time, when he gave the offer of the 10 grand cash, is that when you sat down with Dustin? Yeah. Did you need more cash at that point in time, or you're like, I need a wingman?
Well,
like,
I think once again I was gonna have 2 places.
Oh,
so I
kept C3.
So one, I wanted, because Pataskala was pretty far from Bryce Road at that point. A lot of people were driving from Columbus to see me at the time. So I was like, this is
you definitely would have lost clients if you tried to take everyone to Pataskala.
Columbus didn't feel that wide at that point. Right. You know what I mean? So I think it was a great opportunity. It was the nature of the gym that we wanted anyway. And so it was way easier to go. At that time, we had 3 partners. Each of us threw in $3,300, and was able to buy the gym.
And randomly, Julie and I bought our first house, which we still live in, and had just moved to Pataskala a month prior. Yeah. So we moved out here like the beginning of September, and this happened in October.
Yeah.
So it was just so random.
And then for the 10 grand, you got
everything.
2 members.
Yeah, 2 members.
Yeah, we got 2 members. We got all the equipment.
Okay. And then the lease, like how much length did you have left on the lease, or was that even? Did you guys even worry about that?
Farmer.
Okay.
Yeah. So Doug Beeson, who like they own the True Value and a bunch of the stuff in town. I remember. He was like, yeah, go see Doug Beeson, talk to him about the rent.
Okay.
And I remember I went
at the hardware store.
At the hardware store. I went, he's like, he's like, just bring me $500. I said, okay, like on what day? He's like, beginning of the month. And then we shook hands and that was it.
Yep.
There was no lease, there was no negotiation, no nothing. He just said, bring me $500 every month.
Okay.
And as long as we brought him his money, he didn't care.
Interesting. And you did that for how long?
How long were you there for, D?
Let's see, we were there for 5 years.
I was gonna say. And this was 2003.
2003 when we started it. Yep.
And then how long did you keep T3 going?
Till probably at least 3 of those 5 years, I would say.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I had both places for a while, and then eventually I started doing some online stuff and some other stuff. Eventually, I was able to just go to Pataskala and just told people if they didn't drive, then sorry about your luck. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, too bad. So sad.
Yeah.
And then Dustin, were you graduated from Ohio State at that point?
Yep.
In time? Yep. Okay, so no more teaching. That's gone. You're the gym owner now. So the other gentleman that was involved with you, what was his name again?
Josh.
So he was there all 5 years at the old one?
He was only
really an owner for a little while.
Yeah, he was owner for about a year.
Okay.
I think the big thing was because he had a daughter. He'd had a daughter like right out of high school.
Yep.
And he got offered, he was a part-time worker at GNC also, but then he got offered a management position where he would get full benefits. And so he was kind of like, hey, I have to take this because I need benefits. I have a kid, you know? And so that was kind of what, he still personal trained there for a few years after that, but we bought him out. So now we're two-way partners, probably about a year into it.
I remember we had to put an investment in the gym and get some new treadmills and stuff. And I remember it was really easy. I just called him and said, hey, here's the deal. Like, either 2 of us are paying it back or 3 of us are paying it back. And the deal would be like, you could just keep training here, because I don't know that we actually paid him, because I think it was like he didn't have to pay rent. He never really paid rent.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I think that was something
because it was only like a $3,000 investment. So, but I was like, look, we're about to put 10 in it, and like we got to figure out who's paying it back. And so it was just an easy conversation. It wasn't very difficult.
And he just
at all.
bowed out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you guys did buy Amazing Fitness. Were you guys sitting down, like creating a business plan? I mean, no, I mean, you laugh, but I think also a lot of people overthink
I just
things.
think we were
and
like
I think
this.
you guys, underthought. Like you
Yeah.
probably didn't even think about doing a business plan, or did you have an Excel spreadsheet with all of your expenses?
That, like now we just like lace up and go. Like it's nothing compared to the way we used to be. I mean, we literally were just like, all right, Monday we buy the gym, Tuesday we open. I mean, we'll call whatever.
Figure it out.
We'll just figure it out as we go.
So
I just always looked at what's worst case scenario. That's always the way I looked at it. I was like, I can afford this even if we have no members. That's the way I thought about it.
So did you guys open? Let's talk about just the origination of calling the gym Old School Gym, because it was Amazing Fitness. I'm sure you weren't keeping that. Was that
Well,
like
we
a
didn't keep that
conversation?
at all.
No, because there was nothing amazing about the place.
And there was
just-
no members, so no one even knew what it was.
Yeah, it was so weird, you know. I mean, like we talked about, this guy was basically just trying to use this as like a tax write-off or to try to launder some money or
Right.
something. So
Something a little shaky.
now there's kind of some dispute about this. I remember that I picked the
think
name
I made
Old
up the
School.
name.
Corey thinks it. I mean, he thinks he made it up. I really believe it that I thought of it. I don't know.
But we agree to disagree.
Okay.
That we came up with it together.
Okay,
though.
so then
I'm down with that. We came up with it
come up
together.
with
okay, how did
it was during a conversation,
Okay,
I believe.
gotcha.
But either way, we came up with it. So.
But out of the gate, when you took over Amazing Fitness, like it was always called Old School
Well,
Gym. It was
and
never.
I think the reason we came up with that name, just to kind of rewind a little bit to T3, like when you think of a personal training studio, it needs to be nice, right?
yeah, it's not
Right.
hardcore.
Yeah,
it wasn't
so-
hardcore.
So
Okay.
like we would have like our time when we would lift at T3 where we would like blast the rap music and like get dirty and throw stuff
But that
around.
wasn't what the place was about.
The place was not about that. I mean, there was like I remember Rachel would always keep like a vase full of flowers.
It
We
was
had-
a personal training studio.
It was a
wasn't
personal training
gym.
studio.
Right.
I say gym, but it wasn't a
And
gym.
I can remember like when we went and looked at like buying Old School, there was a part of us at first was thinking along the lines like, how do we make this place nicer? But then we started to realize like, wait a minute, like that's going to be a never-ending battle. This building sucks. It leaks water. It's like it's probably 100 years
raw.
old.
Right.
It's so raw. I was like, we need to like embrace the fact that it's old school. And I think that's how we kind of came up with the name. We're like, you know what, if we don't try to pretend like we're something we're not, because at this time, you know, we talked about going to Gold's Gym when we lived on campus. All these gyms that had been legendary back in the day, World's Gym,
All
Gold's
changed.
Gym, they started trying to straddle that world of like, well, we have this hardcore reputation, but we're going to try to be nice and appeal to everyone. Well, then you're too hardcore for the families that want to go there. You're not hardcore enough for the real weightlifters. So now you're stuck in the middle. No one wants to go there because you suck. So I think we were just like, you know, we just need to be all in on we're dirty. It's
This is what we
loud.
liked anyway.
Yeah.
So we
It was a
figured
more
other
fit.
people would like it too.
Which worked. So let's start talking about, you guys are there. It's successful. You're growing memberships. How long did it take you to really get a membership following over there? Let's be realistic for people that are
To
opening
get
their
over
own
100
place.
members, it took a while, didn't it? Dude?
Oh, at least 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, at least.
You know, I
And-
mean, at first we had a good influx because all Corey's clients followed him. The ones that were at least lived
Down
maybe
the
out
drive,
this way.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of them liked the idea of not training at the studio now because we had more equipment there.
Sure.
You know, so a lot of them wanted to, you know, they wanted to like have a gym membership instead of just being at the studio. So we had a little influx from that. Then now I'm taking it more serious. I'm doing it full time. And yeah, it was probably at least 3 or 4 years into it till we had 100 members. And once we had 100 members, it felt like we were bursting at the seams. It was way too busy in there.
And I think, and we'll go to the story of going into the current building, but going back to marketing, you were doing some radio challenges, correct?
I started doing some
radio.
radio stuff where I had these women like losing weight, crying on the air, and I was like, you know, I was updating.
Like they
once
would
a
pick the
week.
winners. They was like a contest.
Yeah, it was like
New
a
year,
con-
New
so-
Year,
New
New
Year
Year
contest, and so they like all these women would like apply, and I would pick like 8 or 10, like a Biggest Loser type thing. They had to come to Pataskla, so they were driving from all over the city.
But you would train them for free?
Train them for free.
Did you go to the radio station with this idea, or did they
yes, I believe so. I think I went to it with it.
Genius.
I think because I was thinking like, all right, how can I get on the radio for free?
Yeah, because again, no social media.
That was marketing, yeah.
We were paying like an ungodly amount of money to do like mailers, like the
Yeah, we tried a bunch of that kind of stuff.
So we're like, how, I think you came up with the idea, like, I'm going to do this free contest so we can be on the radio for free.
Yeah, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was a great idea.
And these women were like selling it hard because they're literally like bursting, crying, my life's different. And, and it was awesome. I mean, it worked really good. So once a week, I, at least had a spot on the radio to talk about it. And I think it helped draw some regular people to Old School Gym, which was cool.
And so one of your clients, she had lost a lot of weight with you. Her husband actually, her husband own. It was your client, Dustin?
Yeah. So basically, I think, man, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. So Sam Schaefer had heard, I think he had heard the radio contest, and his wife, Kathy, she had applied, but basically she didn't get picked. So I think Sam kind of looked up the gym. They lived here kind of close. They had a business here in Pataskla, and called. And I think like Cory, like she wanted to work out in the evenings. Cory was already stacked that time, so he passed her on to me. I ended up getting the trainer, even though it was kind of a lead that came in through his radio show. So I started working with Kathy Schaefer. I trained her for maybe 2 or 3 years. I mean, she did awesome. She lost like 80 pounds. It was like the first time she'd ever
really
worked out in her life. Yeah, she did excellent. And so I became, really close with her and her husband. And I can remember Cory saying like, hey man, like don't they own that Maverick Motors, that business down in 40? He's like, they have that huge building that looks like an airplane hangar there. Like, why don't you find out what's in there? And I can remember talking to Kathy and like asking her, and she's like, oh, that's what we use for storage. That was where the original shop, the original Maverick Motors was in there. She's like, but we built our building in like 1995 or whatever. She's like, so for the last, however many years, we've just been using it for storage. And Cory like kind of kept hounding me about it, as he's done several times throughout my career.
Stuff every now and again.
Yeah, like it's funny too, because it always ends up working out, whether it's the ebooks or whatever. But he'll get on something about me, and he won't shut up about it until I do it. He'll tell me, I'll be like,
I'm a good friend.
Yeah. I'll be like, and I remember saying like, D, did you talk to Kathy and see if they'll rent us that building? I'm like they're not gonna rent us the building, G. I'm not asking her. And so he kept hounding me, and then finally, like, I basically asked her just so he would quit asking me about it.
So you could tell him they said no.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But
and I remember,
yes.
Yeah. So I was like, hey, I said, Kathy, I was like, we need to move Old School. We're like, this building's too small. Do you think you guys would ever consider renting the Kwanzaa hut? I even know it was called a Kwanzaa hut, but the airplane hangar looking building that's on your property down there. And I was expecting an immediate hard no. But she just looked at me and said, I'll talk to Sam tonight.
Well, Dustin had helped her lose like 70 pounds, so he had impacted her life to such a degree that this is where the payback comes from. She wanted to help.
Yeah, so, it really goes back to the fact that I helped her. Obviously, it was my job to help her, but like the fact that they would even consider is because I'd made such a big impact on her. I still remember, like, I think maybe even right away that night, she went home and talked to him, and I think they called me and said, hey, we want to have you over for dinner tomorrow. We'd like to talk to you about it. I remember thinking, like, they're really considering this? So I went over to their house and had dinner with them. And I can still remember sitting at their table and, like, Sam telling me, like, like, you and Cory really remind me of when I was young and was real ambitious. And, like, someone had to give me a chance. And he's like, I want to be the one that gives you guys a chance, and we want to rent our building to you.
And for a reasonable rate, which we had a lot of work to put in. I mean, we worked on it.
Yeah, basically the deal was like, hey, like, we're going to rent it to you dirt cheap, but, there's a ton of rehab that needs done.
It's like 4 cars with motors out in the front room. I mean, it was shit.
Yeah, there was really no heat. The electric was bare bones
like,
minimum.
Plumbing or anything in here, right? Or maybe one bathroom.
There was one toilet. That was it.
Right.
It was rough.
Right.
Yeah, so kind of the deal was like, hey, you guys can do whatever you want. You can have the lease as long as you want. We'll rent it to you real cheap, but like you guys are going to do all the lifting, all the heavy work. And so then we were just like, all right,
let's go.
How can we make this happen?
So T3 is done at that point in time, though, for a while. So you're just at Old School.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And then you guys would come over here at night after you're done training and start to rehab, or?
Yeah. So we ended up taking out a personal loan for like I remember I put together my business plan like on graph paper. Mm-hmm. Like we wrote down like how much we thought we were gonna need. Mm-hmm. We really had no idea, and we ended up getting a line of credit from someone. We went to a bank, couldn't get any money from a bank, but we had someone step up to the plate and write us a check for $75,000. Mm-hmm. And luckily, we had some clients and some relationship with guys that were contractors and stuff. We're like, okay, we have 75 grand. We have to essentially rehab this, 6,000 square foot building and buy equipment. And so we're just going to have to do basically all of it ourselves. And so we would, train full time at Old School and run the gym. Whenever we were done at night, we would come over here and work for a couple hours. And then on the weekends, we would literally pull 18-hour days on Saturday and Sunday over here, whether it was like, hey, my buddy Tim would come and like he was an electrician. He would show us what we need to do electric wise, and then like
that's why this light switch is wired on the wrong side of the door. It's wired on the wrong side.
Yeah,
of the
we
door.
never even thought about which way the door would open, right? So we literally learned
That's
how to
right
do
there.
everything. Rick Ziff was a big help.
Yeah, Rick was
a
awesome.
client of yours, so he would come over and help us do some of the carpentry stuff, and we basically spent about a year doing that, just learning how to do. We laid all the tile in the bathrooms and the showers and stuff. We pulled
a lot of work.
Every bit of even the insulation, the yellow insulation that you guys see like in the Instagram videos and stuff. You probably look at the gym and think, why is the inside of that hanger that yellow insulation?
Sprayed all that shit on.
We sprayed every square inch of it. And the funny thing was that there was like a vapor barrier over it first that we scraped off. We didn't know any better. We're like, we got to take that off.
Should have left it on there.
We should have. Yeah, it would have been way better. So we spent, a couple months like doing just this, just doing that insulation work. It took forever.
Oh, it felt like it took forever.
So, but with that, like we'll call that the blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, when you guys were ready to open, you're like, this was going to be the spot for the duration. You're like, this is, how were your feelings at that point in time about growing the gym? And are you at that point thinking we're gonna make this a destination gym or just a place in Columbus, or just we need more room?
We just needed more room.
We just needed more room.
And we thought we were gonna open in November.
Right. So
Yeah.
we were getting kind of close to having everything done, and we paid to run an ad in like a local like Shopper Saver flyer
Gotcha.
thing.
Dollar saver.
Yeah, and like where they like said like, hey, we're opening the first of the year, like a new location, blah blah blah, and the township inspector or whatever saw that, and then they saw the dumpster out front, like the work dumpster, and I remember he came and he was like, hey, where is your work permits? We're like, what? What are you talking about?
Where's your building permits?
And he shut us down that day. He put like a stop work order on the door. He was like, you guys can't do anything. You didn't apply for any permits.
We were going to open like a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
And I just remember we had to pay the loan back. We started to pay the loan back.
Okay, right.
We didn't have to
that
pay rent
kicked in.
yet, I don't think, but we were starting to pay the loan
Right.
back, which was over $1,000 a month, and we had no gym.
Oh, nice. So Sam didn't make you pay rent though while
don't
you were
believe-
rehabbing.
No, I
believe
think
so.
he said like, hey, until you guys open the doors, you don't have to pay anything.
But that's like
That's
November.
solid.
We didn't open till the following July, I think, right, D?
I think May or June.
Oh,
Yeah, it was.
That's a long.
It was like 6
Well,
months.
because then at that point they were like, okay, well, what changes have you made to the building? I mean, we'd already built like the wrestling room, we built the locker rooms, and so
We
we
made
had
a
to
lot of changes.
We had to reverse
Right.
engineer it, and we had to go hire an architect, and so they had to make changes. Like they had to put that big steel beam in the wrestling room. It wasn't there originally. Because at that point, like now, like we had to have everything up to code. We had no idea about electrical code. We didn't know anything.
where were you mentally at this point in time? Were you just like defeated, or you just like
It was so tough.
It seemed like it was like now it's like so far out of reach, it's never gonna happen.
right? Were you just like every day, like whatever they would come back with, just try to like knock it out and get
It
it
just
taken
felt like
care
it was
of?
an uphill battle, hard. I
Well,
remember.
I can remember one of the last battles we had to fight. Like we got through all of that stuff, all the permit stuff, like as far as like the actual building. And then I went to apply for the occupancy permit, and they denied it.
Yeah, I remember
And the
that.
reason they denied it is because whenever they wrote the codes for general business in this township, like I guess when you go and look at the actual codes, it lists everything that qualifies as general business. And it had, I mean, I think it said like funeral parlor, nightclub, anything you can think of except for a gym. They forgot that they didn't even think to put a gym in there. So they were like, well, no. That's not included in general business. I'm like, so you're telling me I could put a strip club in here, but I can't put a gym. So then I had to go to like the local Etna Township meeting. I can remember like wearing a suit, and I had to apply, like pay $400 and apply for a variance. And they're like, okay, well, you have to come like plead your case in front of the council why we should accept your variance. And I remember going there and just thinking like that they were going to deny us. I was like almost in tears, like telling them like we put our heart and soul into doing this. We've done all the work ourselves, and blah blah blah, and like pleading our case. We're gonna lose our clients, if we don't move to this bigger place and all this stuff. And they were just like, okay, approved. And then I realized, I'm like, no, they just wanted the $400.
Yeah, of
Right.
course.
That's really what it was all about.
Right. You didn't have to plead the case.
Right.
So then you guys do all the members? They come from the old gym.
Yep.
Like you don't lose any, right?
No,
they're all
really-
probably pumped and excited to
For
have
sure.
the new
And
gym
so
here.
many of them too, like had kind of contributed on one way or another, whether it was our, like Rick Zift or some of the members like Tim.
They're all helping out.
They were all helping, or like, there were people that were donating equipment.
They knew we were battling to try to get this place
Right.
open.
Even some of the guys that had nothing to do with helping us, they would know like on the weekends if they were out and about with their family, they could like stop in the building here and like see what we're up to.
See the progress.
We'd be in here like on the lift, like hanging the electric for the fans. They'd be like, "Oh, what are you guys doing today?" Like people were really interested in what we were building because we were doing it ourselves.
Yeah. True that.
So I think, well, obviously that was a long storytelling session, but I think let's just, circle back, round it all out of that, where you guys started from, where you are today, and what's your like words of encouragement to anybody, specifically wanting to open their own gym or, maybe our affiliates that are out there.
There was nothing easy about this. I mean,
Nothing.
I think that people, just get that screwed up. That, it's cool to tell these stories, but think about how many times this has morphed in a different direction and all these hardships we went through. But I just knew, like, after I had the mild success, which to me was, if I would have never been any more successful, I already felt like I made it compared to where I came from, that you have to expect that you're going to have to go through all that stuff we just talked about, or maybe more, to get there. And every time you have an adversity, there's usually a blessing on the other side if you can just make it through it. Most people just give up. It would have been so easy for us to go, we just pack it in. Multiple times.
It actually would have made sense for me a couple times to actually start my career as a high school teacher and then just train clients part-time after school.
Absolutely.
So I think, there's so many positives about social media, but I think one of the negatives is I think it's kind of gotten an idea in people's heads that like you're going to be able to build this hugely, wildly successful thing overnight, and that is not how it happens. Like there was so much groundwork that we had to lay, not just doing the physical work, not just educating ourselves and becoming good at our craft, but also the relationships that we had to build. If we hadn't built the personal relationships with Kathy and Sam who rented us the building, Rick Zift and Tim who helped us do a lot of the contracting work, the guy who ended up writing us the check so that because we couldn't get financing from a bank, all of those things that contributed to us being able to open old school gym, it was all built on the personal relationships that we had built. And none of those relationships were built with the intention of, oh, I'm going to really help this lady Kathy lose all this weight so someday they'll rent a building to us. Like that was all things that just came out of the relationship. So
never built anything in that way. There's never anything behind it. It was all out of just trying to help people and do our best job possible. And those things they morph over time because of the way people feel about you.
And I think you guys will agree with this, that yes, owning your own business is the hardest thing, but also the most rewarding thing ever. So
I always thought, you heard me say it multiple times, Netty, it never gets old to walk in and throw your keys on the desk and know it's yours. That's it.
I can remember, any time where like the business would feel tough, like we'll even talk about the building just because that was kind of where we ended at there. But like even those days where like it sucked. I can remember us sitting out front and like eating McDonald's. We would eat like comfort food because the job sucked so bad. Because we'd be like, all right, we've been here working 10 hours. We still got to stay till midnight. I would like run down and get us like a couple Big Macs or something. And we would sit out there with our feet in the mud because there was no sidewalk there yet. Yep. And we were eating. I can remember thinking like, well, as bad as this sucks, I'm still like building something for the future with my best friend. I'm listening to fucking rap music right now. And like when this thing opens, we're still going to get to do things on our terms. Yeah. No one's going to be able to tell us like, hey, you can't dress a certain way here. You can't listen to music you don't want to listen to. You got to train people in a certain style. Like we're still going to be able to do things on our own terms. Now, that's not just an automatic given that everyone gets to live their life the way they want, but like by going through the hard times, we earned that.
Absolutely. No, I remember thinking like this is going to be so fucking sick if we can just get it open. But, it was challenging for me really challenging because I was already having kids. I was starting another business in supplements and doing this all at the same time and training clients. I was really, really busy. So I was and competing. I was really overwhelmed at that time. So it was extremely challenging.
And I think so. And this is something we'll get into, someday at a later date on another episode. But something I think people need to realize too is like once we opened this gym, it wasn't just all gravy and it just grew to what we are now. Like
it still isn't.
It was hard to pay the bills still sometimes.
Yeah, and there was a time where we're maybe 3 or 4 years into it, we hit a really rough spot, you know, kind of business wise and financially, where like it actually looked like the gym was going to go under.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, like I remember thinking like, okay, what am I going to do if the gym goes under? Am I still going to continue to personal train? Am I going to like switch to like a blue collar profession? Am I even going to stay in Columbus? Like, what am I going to do? And I'll remember you coming to me and saying, D, I have a plan. And G always has a plan at these points. And you said, and this is right around the same time when social media is starting to take off. This would have been like, you know, maybe 2011. And I remember you telling me like, G, here's what, or D, here's what we're going to do. We're gonna make Old School Gym famous, just like Westside. People are gonna know about Old School all over the world. People are gonna want to travel just to train here. He's like, you know, you have this experience, you know, training high level wrestlers. At the time, I'd only been working with Tommy Rollins. I wasn't involved with Ohio State yet. You're like, but you have this skill set. He's like, you're like, we're gonna brand you as like the trainer for wrestlers. We're gonna blow it up. People are gonna come from all over, and that's how we're gonna make the gym survive. And I can remember thinking like, okay, this doesn't seem possible, but anytime G has brought these ideas to me, it works. I was like, all right, I'm in. So you had a business plan like you wrote on the napkin.
I just knew in my head like this is way too cool and too different that people everywhere are gonna want to experience it. So I just thought we were fucking sweet and it was gonna happen.
So the lesson
blind faith.
And it basically was probably my blind faith in you, because I remember thinking like, okay, this is not rational. Old School is not going to be famous. How are people going to know? Like, but again, even though we'd already experienced some success to that point, you had already made 6 figures as a trainer. We still hit a point where the dream was almost over. But you know, thanks for making me stick with it there, G.
I just remember that I was like, I wasn't ready to give up on it yet. I think that I had good success. I was happy with that, but I was like, this I knew was personal training. The personal training studio wasn't my dream gym. I mean, that was plain and simple. This was like, that's what a lot of people don't realize about me. The other business stuff I've done, like this is still one of my biggest successes because this is what I wanted first. So a lot of people don't realize that because of some of the other things. Maybe the gym doesn't seem as like glorious, but to me it is. And that's what people don't know about me, I think. So it's pretty important.